athletes we obviously have in the program at this point. When we first got here, we're obviously struggling with depth. We feel like we at least have more scholarship bodies. Obviously it's our job to figure out what they can do and, put those guys in the best possible position. So I don't know if I'm comfortable, but we're definitely excited to have those guys here.
Coach, you kind of answered that a little bit, my question, but how much deeper do you feel like your unit can be to help you out throughout the length of ball games this coming season?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit yet to be determined. But again, we do obviously have more scholarship bodies at this point. We just had a defensive meeting. My message to those guys, we're going to play all the guys who've earned the reps. But the reality of it is you got to earn it. But do we have more bodies? Absolutely, and that's a good thing. That's a great starting point. But obviously, as we continue to divvy out reps and, who has the honor of running out there with that starting group, that'll be based on the work that those guys put in. And I know those guys are eager to get to work. So we'll find out soon, exactly how much depth we will have.
A two-part question on your secondary. First off, you've had different guys that are stars and safeties and corners moved around. Can you give us kind of a couple of guys at each position where your starting point is in your secondary?
As far as
who are your corners, who are your stars, who are your safeties?
Yeah, again, it's a lot of moving parts that way. We had guys obviously that played some snaps. Was starters from last year. With Warren Burrell comes to mind. Obviously McCullough, Tank played a ton of reps for us. Flowers have played a ton of reps for us. But the reality of it is, and I know this may sound like coach speak, but just like we did in the spring, we moved guys to a lot of different positions. Trying to figure out what our best combination of guys that we can put out there on the field, so to speak. You start talking about just Wesley Walker, who's obviously just got here. T-Mac, who's been here, didn't play a ton of reps for us on defense, but was a standout on special teams. T-Mac had a really good spring. We're excited about Wesley getting here. But again, we're going to move those guys all around, try to figure out who is the star, who is the safeties, and obviously the corners. But I think it's a good problem to have, again, but we want to coach defensive backs, not necessarily safety, stars, corners. We just want to put the best combination of guys out there we can.
And the second question on that, what's the process for figuring out what that combination is? Is there an urgency week 1, week 2 to get that set, or can that go all the way up to kickoff?
Yeah,
who fits where? It's
always an urgency. Again, we talked about that a lot. Just in terms of what our mantra is, love, trust, and urgency. So, I don't think you can figure anything out of one practice. Obviously you got to continue to rotate guys in, continue to put guys in different spots, see how they adjust to it. But yeah, we like this thing to be figured out, as quickly as possible so you can continue to game plan and, do some different things. But I think it's going to be some really fierce battles. I really do. I think guys that obviously played a lot of significant snaps coming from last year will have great confidence coming in, but we have some young guys that are itching, to prove what they can do. So I think it's an exciting time for us on defense and UT in general. And, like I said, we just can't wait to get to work.
Austin and Ben. Do you know what you have yet in Andre Turrentine and Wesley Walker, and how much do you kind of look forward to getting out there and, getting your hands on them in a more practice-oriented basis?
Yeah, I mentioned Wesley already, but Andre as well. I couldn't tell you exactly that we know exactly what we got. Obviously I remember both young men coming out of high school, and, obviously Wesley had a body of work that he had at the other place. So, but until you actually get them in your system and have an opportunity to, coach the things and coach it the way you want to coach it, you're not quite sure. But I will tell you, they've been nothing but spectacular in terms of their approach, their work ethic, them wanting to be great. So they've been great in our room. I know those guys have really, their teammates have really adjusted to him well, and excited to have them in our family. So we're just excited to see what they can do, these practices that we got coming up. So I'm hoping they're as good as advertised, because we obviously need them, and along with the other guys, to be able to help us, take that next step.
Tim, what have you seen from Juwan Mitchell and just your expectations for him this fall camp?
Yeah, well, obviously, Juwan was a guy who, had some really significant reps for us last fall before he got injured. He started to work his way back a little bit in the spring. Obviously the health issue is always the very first thing. You got to make sure he's feeling healthy, which I think we've turned the corner that way. And then obviously we'll see what he does as he starts to compete for the job. Obviously, you have Banks coming back and Beasley coming back. You brought in Elijah. You feel really good. Solid Page, comes to mind. Pack, Garland, comes to mind. We feel like we have pretty good depth that we're starting to build at that position. But, we obviously felt really good, about Juju or Juwan Mitchell, so it's really up to him and, continue to see what kind of development he's made during the summer, and see if that leads to him, being able to contribute again, which we would hope it does.
Not to belabor the point on the moving parts in the secondary, but with Christian Charles, that was sort of seen as an experiment, I guess, maybe this spring because of the lack of depth you guys had trying him at corner. Did you guys kind of let him continue that work at corner this summer? Did he kind of move back more to safety, or where do you guys have him at least starting off?
Yeah, I think he'll primarily start off at corner, but understanding that he has the ability to move back inside. I mean, he's the poster child for, again, what we're looking for, guys that are very interchangeable, corner skills, but the mentality and the physicality to be able to play inside. So, he'll get an opportunity to win one of those jobs at corner, but he'll also get a chance to win one of the jobs at, safety. So it just depends, but right now, based on how we left spring, is the way we'll start it, and then we'll go from there.
I know practices haven't started yet, but do you feel like from a linebacker standpoint, you can go from playing 3 guys last year to maybe playing 6 or 7 guys in the rotation?
Yeah, you would like to. Again, it's hard to say until you get going, but, if you just base it on pure numbers, you would like to think that, whether those guys play significant snaps just on special teams, you would like to think some of those guys will have better confidence, going into the fall. Again, when you start talking about Apache or William Mohan, you start talking about, again, Garland. Those guys have played significant snaps, even if it was on teams, which obviously lends itself to some confidence. So we'll be disappointed, if we don't have better depth there based on the number of bodies that we have. But as I stated earlier, you'll get what you earn. Those guys have to earn the right, at linebacker, D-line, secondary. We're not going to ever put the program in jeopardy. We're going to put the best guys out there that gives us the best opportunity to win. I think those guys understand that, we would like to play as many guys as we can. I think it helps us in the long run. Obviously, it helps us in the short run, based on how we play. And if they're able to come along, they'll definitely get out there and play.
Jimmy in the back.
Coach, 2 things. One, Nick Saban said that what your cornerbacks can do determine what you can do on defense. Do you subscribe to that theory?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that, particularly based on the kind of scheme that you play. If you're a scheme that, asks your corners to play a lot of man-to-man so you can be able to, load the box, I think traditionally, I think that's a solid statement. We got to figure out, again, who our best corners are. We like to be able to play with at least 3 at the bare minimum. You like to be able to play 4 in a perfect situation. And obviously, once we figure out that position, we continue to see where the best guys are, whether it's star, safety, et cetera. But, I think that's a strong statement, and, I would definitely echo that.
And secondly, Jeremy Banks has shown up on a lot of all-SEC preseason teams. Do you see him having the ability to be an all-SEC player?
I do. I mean, he's one of those guys that, loves the game of football. He plays extremely hard. He's very athletic. He's tough. He has all the traits that you look for from a linebacker perspective. I thought really he was just scratching the surface on how good he could be last year. I think he's worked very hard during the spring to try to shore up some things that we identified as liabilities. I think if he continues to work at, the things that we talked about, I think it's no reason why, he shouldn't be one of the better linebackers in this conference, if not in the country.
Coach, I think you guys last season over 100 tackles for loss. How did that success happen, and how do you kind of replicate that this season with maybe some new guys up front?
Yeah, obviously, our philosophy and how we go about our business will never change. We want to be aggressive in everything that we do, whether we're attacking with our 4-man front, bringing a 5th or a 6th defender. What that ends up being in terms of tackle for losses, that's yet to be determined. But we're never going to change our mentality. We want to be extremely aggressive, in our play, coming off the ball, attacking from different angles. And if it ends up, obviously, whatever the stat is that you threw out, that's awesome. But really, we're just trying to, stay to our identity, which we think bodes well for us to be a successful defense and help the team win.
Vince and Wes.
You were talking about the numbers and feeling better with better numbers in competition. Can you elaborate on that with your defensive line specifically, and how much that can help you with 4-man rushes and not having to send as many on blitzes?
Yeah, I think it always starts up front, as cliche as that may sound. The reality of it is the more guys you can play up there, those guys have to strain, and they're in confrontations every single snap, and they're typically the ones that'll get tired the fastest. So, I think Coach Gardner and the rest of the staff have done a great job, again, identifying some of the weaknesses that we had up front and trying to get that thing corrected. But I think, the ability to play more guys, number one, it gives that competition, makes everybody, strain a little bit harder, to earn that playing time. But I also think it lends itself to those guys being a little fresh, coming down the back stretch when you really need those guys to be able to close some games out. So we're hoping that, we'll develop some more depth that way, whether it be inside or on the edges. And we'll obviously find out as we continue to move forward. But definitely having the ability to play more guys up front, we think bodes well for us.
Tim, Brandon Turnage is a guy who's kind of had a really interesting year and a half. He had the one really big game last year, a couple other solid games, and then, an injury situation, didn't play a lot in some other games. Where is he physically now, and what are y'all looking to get out of him heading into the season?
Yeah, just like I said earlier, he's one of those combo guys, very similar to Christian Charles. He has the ability to play corner. We also think he has the toughness and the awareness to be able to play inside. So he'll get his opportunities, whether it's at star corner, maybe inside, just depending on how everything shakes out. But he's one of those guys that you just love having on the team. He's very positive. He's obviously a really good athlete. We're going to have a hard time keeping him off the field. Like I said, I think we'll have, some really good battles, in camp. And, we'll kind of see how it shakes out. But I think he's heading in the right direction. I think he's feeling healthy, which is obviously half the battle.
Coach Banks, Coach Heupel was really complimentary of Byron Young in his offseason. What kind of growth have you seen from him?
Yeah, tremendous, and I would say first just from a leadership perspective, we put him in some different situations during the offseason where he had to be more verbal, and I thought he answered the bell. I don't think that was his natural instinct is to be able to lead from the front, but he's worked very hard to be very vocal, and I think as he's become more vocal, he's become more confident. He obviously has a skill set. He plays extremely hard. I think he worked very hard to try to refine his technique and his overall knowledge of the game, and I think we'll start to see that pay some dividends moving forward. So I'm excited about him. I would echo this for him the same thing that I said about Jeremy Banks. I think he has the ability to be one of the better players in this conference, if not the country. But obviously he's got to continue to work at that pace, and so far he's done that.
Two more questions, Eric and Brandon.
What's the next step for Tyler Barron to be as good as he can be? And moving down the line, will that help him kind of reach that potential?
Yes, and again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but once again, I'm excited about Tyler. He's healthy. Tyler's a guy who has, unbelievable, strength, power, speed to power ratio. And he's obviously a guy that's really, really bright. He's able to play the Leo spot for us. He's also played the end spot for us. He has that versatility that I spoke about with the corners, being able to play inside and outside. He's a guy who has the ability to be able to play either side of our defense, and has the ability to slide inside, based on situations. So I think as he continues to, take care of his body and as he stays healthy, I think he has a chance again to have a really big year for us. And I think he would tell you the same thing. He's worked his tail off this offseason, and I think he's primed for a big year.
With the exception of more depth, playing more people, where do you expect this defense to grow this year? And will you be more multiple? Do you add a lot this offseason schematically? How do you expect this defense to grow besides playing more people? Yeah,
I think it's no different than what I told you guys last year. A lot of it is, but we have core beliefs in what we want to do, but a lot of it is based on our personnel. So as we continue to figure out what these young guys can do, some of the freshmen that that just got here, even if they came in the spring, continue to figure out what their strengths and liabilities are. We'll be able to highlight that, so to speak, in our package. And then the same thing with some of the transfers that we got in here. How can we best take advantage of their skill sets? And that would dictate, how multiple we are. We obviously want to do some different things and try to keep the offenses guessing best we can. But at the end of the day, it's all about playing to the strength of your team, the strength of your players, and highlighting the right guys. And we'll continue to stay that path.
Thank you, Coach.
All right. Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Tom loves here, but he leaves. So comfortable.
it's because I'm not on Wi-Fi. It's just hot out there,
We will conclude our press conference portion. Entering his second season as the offensive coordinator and tight ends coach at Tennessee, Alex Golish. Questions for Coach?
Nice and warm. Feels good in here.
Alex, right here. You got two new starters at wide receiver aside from Seth. How dependent is he to get open on the play of those other two guys? How much does his production depend on how good those other two guys play?
Yeah, I think it'll all kind of play itself out as it goes. You know, a year ago we were walking into the same situation with Sed was a guy nobody knew about. You know, Bayless was a guy nobody knew about. So I think it'll kind of play itself out, whether people can feel like they need to roll coverage that way or do something unique to take him away. Obviously, if it becomes a one-man show, that would be really hard offensively. But I think in this system, I think looking back at it over the years, it's kind of played itself out. We feel good with who's going to be opposite of him in terms of whether it's one guy or a group of guys. We feel like this is as deep as we've been in the slot going into camp at least. There's a bunch of guys that have to prove something in that room. I think in the same breath as they did a year ago, a bunch of guys that had to prove something in that room. But I think it'll be exciting to see kind of what happens. There's some really good young players, how fast they grow up, how fast they figure out what's really going on. What helped is having the three freshmen here in the spring. Now you're not teaching them how to play. They can actually continue to perfect their craft. But I think if he was a one-man show, it would be really, really hard. I'm pretty confident that it won't be that way.
Alex, can you talk about the tackle competition with those guys and obviously two very important positions?
Yeah, Vince, I think this is such a big question mark for us is who is it going to be, and is there a rotation there, or what's it really going to look like? You know, in a list of questions we have going into camp, that would be right up there. I think it'll be exciting to see, you know, moving Darnell over to right kind of, I don't want to say solidifies it, but kind of solidifies that side of it, and you feel pretty good. And then letting Dane and Gerald and JJ figure out who the second guy is and who can play over at left. We went through spring, left there, feeling pretty good. I think just as important as who starts out there is who's the third and the fourth. Last year we got to the third and the fourth pretty quick. You hope you don't, but you got to have a third and fourth and really even fifth, and figuring out the depth there. I think whoever's going to be there on the left side hadn't played a whole lot of football. So, you know, Dane's played the most. I think Dane gives us a veteran presence. I think Dane gives us some flexibility with being able to play inside. But JJ and Mintz are both going to be guys that obviously Mintz hadn't played any there for us, and JJ's played really limited snaps. So it'll be a really good competition. We're gonna make it hard. We're gonna go, and I think from a mental standpoint, both those guys are ready to roll. I think it'll just be a matter of who can be the most consistent. We just got done talking through as a whole offense is who can string days together. That spot especially, who can string days together, and that's who we're going to roll with. And we've rotated there before. Gosh, you'd feel good leaving camp if you said, man, we got 4 at tackle that we can go play with. But it'll be a really interesting competition. It'll be graded daily. They'll both roll with the ones. I think Dane will get some with the ones, and hopefully by that second scrimmage, by practice 12, you feel like, all right, this is who it is. But I would feel a lot better if we left saying we have 7 or 8 than, man, that's our starting left tackle.
Ben and Patrick.
Alex, just where do you feel Jalen Hyatt and Jimmy Callaway are going into camp, and those three freshman receivers? Just how excited are you to see what they can do this fall camp?
Yeah, I think that competition in the slot with Jalen and Jimmy and Squirrel, you know, with Walker being able to get some in there as well. I think Walker's experience a year ago was priceless because he's a guy we feel like can be a swing guy for us. I'm excited to see all three of those guys. I think, you know, Jalen had a really, really good spring. Jimmy finished spring really well. And Squirrel was so exciting to see this spring just because of what his mental makeup is, what his skill set is. That he's in so many ways, Squirrel in so many ways is mature beyond his years. But I've said this before, I think so much of what a season is who can handle it. Who can handle the camp is one thing. There's no school, there's no outside pressure, there's no anything going on. And then students get back to school. Cumberland looks a little bit different. There's academics, there's tutors, there's requirements, there's people pulling you, there's families in for games, and there starts to be a lot of distractions. And I think so much of playing college football right now is who can handle that part of it. You know, obviously there's more distractions than there ever has been. So who can handle the rigors of the day-to-day and be consistent through what they're doing? And I've said this about freshmen before, it's all pretty easy until you get going into a routine of what a season looks like. Squirrel, for a freshman, was as impressive handling school and football at the same time as I've seen. Probably because he just kind of stays to himself and doesn't let outside distractions affect who he is and what he does. Again, it's going to get harder and harder for him. But that competition in there, again, if we leave there with some depth, I would be beyond excited. That would be better than we were a year ago. You know, Jalen Hyatt took monumental steps in the spring, just in terms of his growth as a player and as a young man within the program. Jimmy Callaway has been super inconsistent since our time here. So the challenge to him is, can you be the same guy every day and continue to grow? Because it's going to be really hard if not. And you asked about the three freshmen. Same deal. I think it'll be interesting to see how they attack this next 3 weeks, and then once school starts and we get into playing games, how they really can grow and continue to become assets in the team. To the team, I think, you know, you'd love to get those guys out there and get them into games early on special teams and let them see what it's like to be a college football player, and then see how they can help us offensively. It'd be great if all three of those guys panned out as freshmen and we had depth like that. Boy, we would be really good.
Alex, looking at your backfield without Laneith, how do you feel about the offseason that Jabari and Jalen have had, and how much are you guys going to be pushing Justin and Dylan to be ready to play?
Man, really hard. I think Jabari has changed his body in so many ways and is about as focused as I've seen him since we've been here. I think so different when you go into the year and you know you're being counted on. Is everybody else sweating like I am right now? Okay, good. So let's see if we can change the exposure on the cameras in the back. I feel like I'm just got done with walkthrough of practice. But I think anytime you're the guy going into the year, just the way he's even walked into the facility, there's like a different look on him. You know, there's a confidence about Jabari. I don't think he was super confident a year ago. And there's a confidence about him. He's changed his body. He's 210 plus pounds now. I joke with him that he now looks like an all-purpose back rather than a third down back. And the hope there is he can get and stay healthy throughout what is a pretty rigorous schedule. Jalen Wright has changed his body. Jalen Wright's, you know, Jimmy, we talk about Jalen Hyatt a lot growing up and really changing who his best is. Like Jalen Wright is the same guy, man. Like he comes in now confident. Like it's been so awesome to see his growth. He had a tough time here his first year, coming in and enrolling early and all those things that hit him right in the face. He's a different young guy right now. He's like exuberant and really excited to be here and like raises his hand to answer questions like he's a different kid. So that's been really, really exciting. Now, those two young guys, Justin and Dylan, they've both been told, you're going to get as your work deserves, and we need both those guys. We're not very deep. We got to do a really good job managing those guys through camp and keeping them healthy. We're going to give Justin Williams and Dylan every opportunity to see if those guys can play early, and let them run behind the 1 and 2 O-line and see what they can do. The running part, not as concerned about as can you protect the quarterback. Those are the things for a young back that can cost you football games, is not being able to protect. And so those guys have had a good summer. Jerry Mack's done a really good job getting those guys ready. Justin, we've seen. It'd be interesting to see what his growth looks like. That's a big question mark. We talked about like tackle. Big question mark to see what Justin has been able to do this summer, how that translates over into real football. And then Dylan, enrolled in June. So I'm excited to see Dylan because I think there's some really unique playmaking ability in space with him. And I think he can do a lot of things, at least off of high school film. And he's got real track speed, and he's a tough, smart young man. I'm really excited to see what Dylan can do. So we're going to need them all at some point. I'm aware of that. We're going to have to be really smart how we handle those guys in camp because we're not very deep. But our job's to find a way to make the depth go and win football games. So that's what we're going to do.
Brent and Madison.
Are you committed to Darnell being on the right side, or is that open that he could play left or right from the tackle position? And then secondly, as you go into year 2, you've got a bunch of guys who have played in your system, so I would imagine you want to grow there, but you're also having to talk about needing young players and newcomers. So what's the challenge of getting newcomers ready to play when you're maybe in your second year of growth of your offense? Is it different than a year ago asking a freshman to play in your system?
Yeah. Darnell Wright, Brent. Darnell Wright, in our mind right now, to keep him on the right, let him get comfortable, which is what he felt like was his natural home there 2 years ago, and letting those guys compete on the left side, I think will give those guys on the left side the best chance to compete rather than flip-flopping those guys. We want to see who can do it and then figure out the depth from there, because whoever ends up being third is going to have to be a swing guy. And so letting those guys compete at one spot would make it easier. Can Darnell flip over? I'm sure he could. But then moving those left guys back and forth, I don't think will give those guys the best opportunity to show us what they can do and give them an opportunity to be successful. Freshmen in their second year, I think at the skill spots, unique because all of them except for Dylan Sampson were here early. And so they were thrown right into the culture, thrown right into the football. So I think they've got a better chance this year. A young guy has a better chance this year to play than a year ago. A year ago, you were trying to find the 11 that could play in a game without all the other craziness that was going on. But the 11 that could play in a game, so you had to be mature, you had to have learned it fast enough, and you had to have been physically ready. Now, you got a year under your belt. Those guys came in where they didn't have to learn it totally from scratch. They were able to get extra attention this spring. I think it gives them a better chance to compete this fall. Again, I go back to, we would love to play as many guys as we can. I think it would make us better because of the tempo we play at. Inherently, depth is something that can help you score points. At the same time, we're going to play the guys that are ready and the guys that we trust. I think if we've learned anything, it's that if you play guys that you trust, you're more willing to accept the end result of it than if you're playing guys just because you have to play a guy. I think that's our job as coaches, is to put the best 11 out there, and you obviously build depth through recruiting and development. And those young guys are now a year older. Those young guys are a year more developed. You hope you have more depth. And that's our job, to develop those guys. What helps this year more than anything, Brent, to be honest with you, is going in knowing who your quarterback is. Going in, and Jabari has a resume of film. Cedric has a resume of film. Those old linemen that are coming back have a year of film, and they have a resume built. You're more likely to be able to throw a Dylan Sampson in there at one running back, knowing that those reps for Jabari can be just as good mental reps as they can be actually physical reps. That's where you can go in and feel a little bit more comfortable. At the same time, the psyche of those guys understanding, being mature enough now to say, man, I'm not taking the one rep, rather than standing over there on the sideline and playing towel ball with my buddy. I now know what's going on, and I'm locked in and watching and being able to steal reps mentally rather than physically having to go through them to allow young guys to get reps. I know that was really long-winded, but I guess yes would be the answer.
Madison in the back.
Coach, you talked about it some with just the competitiveness going on in the slot right now. Heupel was telling us, well, Hendon Hooker is QB1. Him and Milton really have a healthy competition going on every day as well. How have you seen their leadership really encourage and motivate some of these younger guys to compete every rep of every practice?
Yeah, I think just the way Hendon and Joe carry themselves, one, their competitive relationship with each other has been really fun to watch, because they do truly like each other and encourage each other and are each other's biggest fans. I think the young guys and that slot position's really, really young, having somebody to look at and say, man, that's how you become a college football player. That is how you act. That is how you come to work. I think at every spot is that way, where you're looking for model examples for these young guys, but Hendon and Joe have done a really good job of taking ownership in it, not feeling like they're stepping on each other's toes. I give those two a lot of credit. That's more than I could do at 22 years old, and somebody's in front of me. I'd have a hard time being a good soldier there. But credit to those guys, credit to Joey Halsley and how he's managed that room, and Coach Hype's leadership and pushing that on those guys, what a quarterback is supposed to do, what he's supposed to look like, act like, what the day-to-day looks like. They're still young guys. They still screw things up. And but they have those guys leading has been really, really good. Cedric stepping up in a leadership role, which is way outside his comfort zone. That's not who he is, and us putting pressure on him to do so has been monumental there. Jalen Hyatt has developed into a leader in that group. Because of the way he's worked, he's earned the right to do that. So it's been really, really fun. But, give Jerome Carvin a lot of credit. Like, he's taken a ton of ownership for us. I think a year ago, he was kind of looking around like, what the heck is going on? He's taken a bunch of ownership in the entire thing, too. So, but their relationship is unique. Like I said, give those guys a lot of credit. I couldn't do that. I think most of us grown-ups got egos that couldn't handle it.
Last question really quickly, Jim.
Coach, in the NFL, the left tackle is valued more than the right tackle because they're protecting the blind side. In an up-tempo offense, is the left tackle any more important than the right tackle?
Yeah, I'm not sure what the tempo would really have to do with it. It is the blind side for the quarterback. We can control who's got help and who doesn't in terms of schematically. But I'm not sure if the tempo really has anything to do with the blind side. And I'm not being facetious in the answer. Just that is the blind side for a right-handed quarterback. But the scheme more so dictates it than the tempo in that world. Trying to